Hello. How are you, Fred?
Good. I'm doing great. How about you? It's so
Uh,
nice to connect with you on this different level for sure.
yes, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you. This is our first episode of the Stillpoint podcast. And Fred and I have been friends for a while now, and we have these conversations every week that activate me so much. And I had shared with him that I had this idea of doing a podcast, and it's been about 3 years since I had the notion of doing a discussion around what it means to be in the still point or the 0 point. And it just never came together. It wasn't time to execute it. But right now, so many synchronicities are happening in my own life that are allowing me to see now is the time. And so Fred and I are going to be co-hosting this podcast. Hopefully, we can get an episode out each week. And we're just simply going to be in the still point, which to me means the space between time. It definitely means dropping into your heart, getting out of your head. I see athletes in the still point when they're in the zone. You don't even know why they're at optimal performance. They may not even know why, but you know when someone's in the still point. So I welcome your thoughts, Fred, on what that means to you. But
It
that's
is so true. I was just talking to a friend of mine last night. And we were talking about getting in the zone, like
mhm.
because you hear that term, you hear it a lot in relationship to sports. I think just because sports has such an emphasis, in media and in our country in general. But I think that deeper energy of that still point is what a lot of people are starting to gravitate and find, and truly find it and understand what it means. Or they're finding the power of themselves in that still point, but they don't quite know how to navigate that energy. So this is kind of like what Kristin and I have been talking about too, over the past few weeks and God for years, which is about just getting into that space of conscious creation. And to me, that's kind of like what the zone or the still point is. Still point, 0 point, void, if you want to call it void. It's just that space where there is no unconscious creation in a way, and everything and anything is possible. And I think that's what we really want to kind of get our space into, is to where we can be in that conscious creative state
I
instead of
love
the
that you use those words. Yeah. And so if we think about 95%, they say, of what we do is the subconscious mind, riding a bike or just those things we're doing throughout the day, and conscious being something we're aware of. But I think even deeper than that, over time, this will evolve, this creation with our consciousness, because it's conscious. I definitely see that, but it's definitely not fully mind oriented either. It's that heart, probably the heart brain coherence that comes together, because it's magical when you're in the still point.
totally is. And the head heart connection is so vital to get into that still point, because I think that's like that to me is almost, if you want to call it like the Trinity in a way, it really is your soul that's integrating with this physical body, through the unconscious programs of the mind and then the emotions of the heart space. But so many times in so many aspects of our life, we're just reacting to the, like you said, that 95% unconscious of what we're creating in our existence. And we're just in a very reactive state. So this is going to be a different type of experience, because like we don't have topics, we kind of are coming into this completely blind in a way, because we want to be in that still point. We want to be in that space of creation in the moment to see what's able to be able to come through without all of that unconscious energy that's kind of distracting us too. It's really powerful.
It is
Um,
powerful. And I think, I met Fred through theta healing training,
mhm.
and Fred and I just did a quick theta healing right before we hopped on here. And it was beautiful because we saw the same visuals. And it just shows how telepathically we can connect. So I think for you as our audience, one thing to know is that whatever we're talking about, there's going to be a healing taking place for all of you during our episodes. And it's just naturally going to happen because you're going to come into a similar brain state that we're in. I don't know if you want to share more about that, but I think it's just so beautiful to know everyone's going to receive something from this.
It's so true. I mean, it's fascinating. Like we're 1,100 miles away. She's in Florida. I'm in Arkansas. And as soon as we got on the call, and then we kind of just like tapped in to see what we were feeling and experiencing, like I could tell that Kristen was in a theta brain, because when your eyelids are closed and they're fluttering, that's rapid eye movement. So that reflects that you're in a dominant theta state. And yes, I do theta healing in a way, but I'm not attached to that modality as much. But even though it has allowed me to experience and understand a lot of things about life that I didn't know before, but I always attribute it to the theta brainwave and the importance of that brainwave. And most adults, the only time you're in a dominant theta state is your dream state. That's when you're producing and creating unconsciously these dreams and these experiences. So if you just think about that brain work alone of a dream, think about your unconscious mind is creating something that can be more realistic than the waking world. So to me, when I look at the four brain waves of delta, theta, alpha, and beta, theta is the brainwave of creation, because when we're in a dominant state, that's when our brain starts producing and creating things unconsciously. So the only difference is when we're awake, most adults will gravitate into an alpha or beta, usually busy beta, to where you can't stop thinking to save your life. But that underlying frequency of theta that's running in the background is what is really creating our existence unconsciously. And I think that's really important just to understand like the foundations and the basics of what we are doing in this existence, especially when it comes to what we're creating, because we can't create something that our brain and our heart doesn't understand, and that's that head heart coherence that's so important, the program and then the feeling that goes with that program. And if you're missing either one, or it's not a true head heart connection, it's almost impossible for us to even unconsciously create that experience. So what we create in our life is a reflection of what our brain believes to be its truth and what emotions our heart understands to be able to speak that language. So it's really vital with this. And I know Kristin's been doing a lot of work with this too, like with her clients and everything. And it's just being in that theta brainwave. And even if you're watching this, even though this is recording, you may find yourself becoming a little bit sleepy or tired or maybe a little altered. Sometimes they even call it, some people say they feel like they're high, so it's kind of like this cool experience because your brain's gravitating into a dominant theta brain where it's usually not. And so it puts you in a very different perspective of where you're the witness for what you are experiencing versus reacting to what's happening to you.
I love that you mentioned that because I haven't thought about it. But when I'm on a Zoom call with my clients, first of all, I will see them yawning. So that's typically a sign they're relaxing. But I always like to create a safe container for people. And, that's really what's happening here is things are coming up that can be really big because we can clear things so quickly, but it's safe to clear it, right? It's just like you skim it off the top and you move on. And, those of you that follow Joe Dispenza, you see these miraculous healings at different, seminars that he does. It's because they're tapped into this 0 point, it's where anything is possible. I think it's truly the infinite potential that we all have, but it's hard personally to get in that state on your own. And
Mm.
that's the beauty of being in, even just witnessing Fred and I on this podcast, or just, doing something you love and really tapping into that magnificence.
It's powerful. And I think the biggest part about it is, like you said, it is a new thing for most people. So that it's like riding a bike. It's like
Yeah.
the first time you get on a bike or even driving a car, it's like, oh my God, there's so many things that can distract you. And you have to learn where everything is, where the turn signal is, where the radio, the volume, all this stuff when you're trying to drive. But eventually over time, you get used to it. And then you get to the point where you can drive your car and be doing three different things, even though you probably, may not want to be doing that, but we do it
Yeah.
anyway, phone or eating or doing whatever, because you just get used to that experience. So being around someone in a dominant theta brainwave, it really allows your brain to be entrained into a perspective that you're not used to seeing. But the more that you get into that space, the easier it really is. And also theta is the brainwave of intuition. So a lot of intuitiveness will come through when you're in a dominant theta state versus, intuition when you're not. And I know
Beautiful.
you're more hardwired, Kristin, with intuition than what I am personally. And that's through that whole chirology experience of looking at someone's hands to see how the brain is wired. which is another thing that I've been doing for a while now. But it's really fascinating to see there's a lot of people that are just hardwired intuitive versus myself. I have no markings for it, but just by getting into the theta brainwave, my intuition has opened up tremendously over the past 8 years. And that intuition space is that still point.
Yeah.
You're in that gap of creation to where wavelength energy, if you want to get into quantum, wavelength energy is everything and anything that's possible. It's like the palette that we get to use to create whatever we want to create or unconsciously create. And then what gets converted from wavelength, it becomes a particle. And a particle is what appears to be real in this holographic existence. It's a little bit of a mind bender. But really what gets converted to a particle and what appears to be real is based on what our brain believes to be its truth and what it feels like. I always kind of equate it to what we create like a language. Because if you're around a person that's speaking a language you don't know, you're not even going to recognize anything that's happening, at least not consciously. So what we want to ultimately get is into that unconscious state of creation to where then we can start to consciously create what we want to experience versus just what is happening unconsciously based on our programs and our emotions.
A perfect transition. That's what keeps coming up to me as the most empowered place we can be in right now is to live at the cause and not the effect of life, right? And so the past few years, I think many of you that would watch this right now can relate that it's been pretty brutal to live at the effect of a world that, we're seeing things we never saw before. It feels inverted. It feels hostile. It feels awful at times, until you come into the still point and you realize you are the creator. So I think what can happen from the still point is that you can alter your beliefs. You can realize that I can choose to live in fear of this, or I can choose to, I always like to look at it as transmute it or alchemize it and create a new belief that empowers me more. And we will talk in future episodes about some situations where personally or my work with clients, it's just been unbelievable to see a 180 transformation when you do those things. You first have the intention of not living at the effect of things, and then you start to alter your beliefs. You do become the creator. And I think that's what Fred and I really want to give legs to through our episodes is how do you do this? How do we make it very simple and practical for you? We'll share a lot of experiences we've had, and it's just beautiful, to be able to live this way.
It absolutely is. When you can empower someone, including yourself first, obviously, empower yourself to take ownership of your life and that we are creating this existence, even if it is unconscious, up to this point. But it's almost like you need to understand the rules of the game of life in order for you to be able to effectively play it the way that you want to play it. So that's kind of what we're looking to talk about in so many different topics and things that we've already had discussions about. This is kind of like mind blowing where it flows, is just to be able to empower people to understand the truth and what they are as that divine spark of creator. Like if you want to call like the God creative energy like an ocean, we're like a drop of that ocean. So we are very similar to one another, but yet we still have our uniqueness and our differences that allows us to be able to go through and experience different lifetimes because of that's what our soul, our spark of creativity wants to go in to learn and how to play in this existence.
I love that. There's so many different things we can talk about in time around that, but man, I
So
just know it's so helpful to have these different contextual ways of looking at life, to get our power back again in the moment, because it can feel, especially if you're scrolling on social media these days, it's like, you want to follow some of these things because you're getting education from, like-minded people, but sometimes there's something posted that just triggers you in a way or makes you feel fearful when you don't want to. So you've really got to use discernment. There's a lot of skills that come into play to navigate as the leader of your own life right now. And that's really the goal, I know, for myself.
absolutely. And 2020 was a very pivotal year, obviously, for not just what's been going on around the world, but energetically, that was one of the first times in human history where the majority of the planet was focused on one thing. When whatever that energy was in 2020 of like the COVID experience and how everything just shifted from everyone's existence changed. So the way I view that beautiful shift and change in 2020 was it was breaking up people's patterns. It was breaking up the routines, all everything that they've been doing their whole life up to that point, they would just continue to do it every day. It broke that energy up. And then there was this amplification of the perceived fear that was going on. So fear is a beautiful motivator because it allows you to see where things are imbalanced. Or if you're not aware of why that fear is being created, then you're in that reactive state. And then we get into that victim mentality. And when we feel that things are happening to us that's out of our control, you're going to be in that fight or flight stage. And then it's going to be really hard to be able to navigate consciously through that experience because you're just unconsciously, your brain believes you're just trying to survive something versus thrive.
And you know what I've noticed, Fred, is when you're in that situation where you're so afraid of something, right? And things are shaken out in a way, it's almost like riding down the river and, it's getting rapid and there's like no stopping you. You're going, right?
Yeah.
So you go through that fear. I always like to see it as the eye of the needle too. It's like you go through it. And I see that as the still point too, because once you get to the other side, number one, you're like, I'm still breathing, right? And you start to get your power back. And the things that you feared the most, again, it's like the cave you fear to enter. It's like it empowers you on the other side. And then you realize, wait, all these narratives, all these things I've been told, like maybe there's another story here that I can write. And that's where you can take just that awareness and really write that story and never look back. And yeah, that's what's exciting me the most right now.
It's so powerful. I love that eye of the needle kind of perspective because that is exactly what it is. It's we're crossing through an area and entering another space through that eye of the needle, that still point that we haven't really experienced before. So where it allows us to see both sides of every situation, and I like just to keep things simple because well, really from a biological perspective, the majority of our unconscious programs and beliefs and feelings and emotions are in place by the age of 5. So when you really look at that from the brain and the heart perspective, it's going to be a simple perspective because it's coming from like a 3 or 4-year-old's viewpoint, which is very limited on this earth. And then later in life, as we get older and become more so-called intelligent, as our cerebral cortex kind of forms into the point where we think we know everything, then what happens is, these unconscious programs are starting to reflect and show us what it is that we do believe to be our truth. And I think a lot of people have seen in the past 4 years, a lot of stuff that we have been told and been taught in the past is completely the opposite. We're seeing a different truth. And that can also be challenging.
So challenging. I mean, I often chime in and help with different support groups or spiritual groups, and I see so many people feeling so depressed right now, even in these groups, and just looking for something that they can hold on to right now. And again, it's that eye of the needle that they're right at the edge of it. And it's just knowing it's okay to move through it and you're going to get to the other side. But I think that's the importance of us coming together right now and reminding each other of that. I look at that 2020 to 2024. I mean, I am nowhere near the same person I was. It's unbelievable how much I've changed.
I think
So it
everyone
is a blessing, but man, it's been raw.
think about the people that, yeah, they're shifting and changing, but they're just dropping into a deeper state of that fear, because of what they believe to be truth is really being shown to them to look at that other side, look at the loving side of something. Loving feels good, fear feels bad. Not always like a fear, like a phobia, because those are the two basic emotions generally that we can experience. But the magnitude within the loving side and the fearful side is eternal. There's so many different emotional expressions that you can experience. And the programs are just going to be they're there or not. It's a very static kind of thing with the program. But even like with Chris and I've been talking about, even with ourselves, is being able to understand how those programs are there, and then using this magnificent theta brainwave we have of creation to shift and recreate those programs and recreate new feelings and receptors on ourselves to be able to experience like what unconditional love is. We all have experiences and brain programs of what we think love is, but usually it's based upon a fearing experience in the first 4 to 5 years of our life where we're not sure what's going on, but then we're told that this is love. So we all have false beliefs in a way, but that's part of what we chose to come here to experience. If we're here to find love in the face of fear, well, then we have to be kind of front loaded with a lot of fearful experiences in order for us to get through that eye of the needle, that still point, to see what the loving side of that coin is. Because when we are able to see both love and fear in every situation, then we truly have a choice. But if we're only running off of, what our programs are, and we're not aware of that we're running off of these programs, then we really are just living in a state of fear. We're only seeing half of that existence.
Well, and then, yeah, I can look at my early life in my 20s where I essentially was on autopilot. I was doing everything you were told to do, right? Problem was I was also watching the news every night before bed, and like just you're constantly programmed in fear. You don't even know you're being programmed in fear until, I had an awakening moment when my mom died, and I had this beautiful out of body experience of peace. And I was like, what is happening? It was
Wow.
so beautiful in 2013, but that changed everything for me. I became insatiably curious, like what happens after we die? What is this world I'm living in? What's the future me potential? And now we are walking in like 3D, 4D, 5D. We'll talk about what that actually means, but there really is no time. And it's crazy to even think about. Everything slowed down in a third dimension, so it feels very linear. But as we embrace the now moment, even if you're in that fearful place and you're still breathing, you're realizing, all right, I'm not dead from this fear, where your autopilot version may have thought that was certainly going to happen,
Yeah.
right? So
I
these
can
are all
feel
the things that we get to leverage in the still point to make the leap, the quantum leap to 5D and beyond. And that's our new earth, essentially. So we'll be able to kind of, these aren't physical places, they're states of mind that we're going to explore.
That's a perfect example of, through a fearful experience of your mother's passing, it allowed you, to look at it and be able to perceive it differently and to see the other side of that experience, to be able to see both aspects, and then we truly are able to focus and choose and make different experiences because we're able to see just a little flip of a coin is all it really takes. But it can be incredibly challenging when the emotions that are attached with an experience are so extreme, especially on the fearful side, to where it can also become crippling at times.
Yes.
So having tools and being able to realize, why this may be happening, and without time existing, in our conscious mind or unconscious mind, we need the perspective of the past, present, future. So, because if you woke up and each day you woke up, you were a different age, it could be 5, the next day you're 8, next day you're 2, the brain wouldn't be able to make sense of this sequence of what's happening.
Yes.
So the reason why our mind understands time in that linear fashion is that way we can look at what we've experienced in the past to maybe make a different choice in the present moment, which will then allow different opportunities to be created in the future. But outside of these physical existence, there is no concept of time, and that can be very challenging for the mind to fully understand.
Yeah, and we can essentially just like stop whatever's playing out in the one moment in time and shift gears. And that's the stuff I've been playing with, is shifting gears on something big happening and immediately seeing a better version evolve.
Totally. I mean, look at your
That's
fear.
the power.
It is powerful because once you understand it, like once you see that process once and experience it once, then you can experience that with everything in your life, is to be able to find a balance or still point in everything. because when you're in that balanced still point state, that's pure wavelength energy. There is no particle that's reflecting an imbalance of something in our life. And that's the real other fascinating part about quantum too, is that, the wavelength and particle are the two different types of energy. Wavelength is that still point, everything and anything that's possible. But then what gets created to a particle as real is based on what we believe. So there has to be an imbalance with a particle. There has to be more love or more fear. It's just most of our programs are fear-based versus love-based. And that's part of the experience of what Earth is, to me, at least. To me, Earth is hell. This is where fear resides.
Totally hell. Validating that one for sure.
And it makes it easier. Then you're like, oh, okay. So I'm not going to be eternally damned to someplace, for a finite life, which just doesn't make conscious or unconscious sense either. But holy crap, that's a whole nother topic we can get into. Just the whole,
like, what did we sign up for? Because this, and the fact that karma, we've talked about karma, like all these things, as you gain more awareness, you're realizing even that's changing, so all of these things that I think, it's like you're climbing a ladder, and at one level you can only see so much, so that becomes your puzzle pieces to kind of make sense of the world around you. But then you climb the next rung of that ladder and you're like, whoa, there's a whole nother view here. And that's what we get to be excited about right now, is we're creating more skills, resources, tools to feel empowered and to not live in hell so much until that heaven on earth really is like right in front of us.
And that's, I think, what we're really here to do, is to bring heaven to earth, because that, to me, and so there's a reflection of that duality once again. What does Earth represent? Earth is a beautiful, beautiful being within itself. And Earth is going through its own shifts and changes too. And we're kind of along for the ride. We go where Earth goes. So there's a beautiful co-creative energy that's going on with us and Earth once you're able to understand that. But I think what's really, truly vital is to take ownership that whatever we're experiencing in our life is being created through us. We don't want to fall into a victim mentality. And with time not existing, then technically you're going to know everything that you're going to experience in any incarnation before you choose to incarnate into that. It's like a movie. We're creating a movie of a life that we want to experience based on what lessons or curriculum or whatever you want to call it, that we want to experience in relationship to love and fear through different details and different people. Yeah. So there are no victims, and that's the harder part to fully understand. But then you start to question, like, why would have I created a life? I've done that a few times. Yeah. And that's part of the rub, and that's just like, I get that that's going to be an instant reaction when, people hear these things and understand these things for the first time. But that's part of the evolvement of what we're here to be learning from, is it's not just everything that's in the past is truth. It's just a lens and a snapshot of a perspective based on where a person was at that time.
Yes.
Wow, it's so powerful.
So much, and just to feel compassion towards others and to get out of this duality and divide and come back to unity. I think that's a real goal, for all of us to find that inner peace again. No one wants to be divided, this fighting. And then you can see all the systems in the world that were set up to keep us separated, right? And,
pretty much every one of them.
Yeah. And, even with my kids, I think about what they're learning in school versus what they could be focused on, and it's just like, we were conditioned heavily. So, how can we help you remove that guilt or shame for, I know for myself, I went through a period of that. Like, how didn't I know better at that phase? Or, and that's not helping us at all to view that, younger self of ours harshly. So how do we have self-love and self-compassion, not only for ourselves, for other people? Because the sooner we can do that, the sooner that heaven on earth is going to be here.
Absolutely. And it's not about, judgment is a whole other topic too. I'm not a big fan of the word judgment, because that always infers there's a right and wrong. And to me, what's right for one person doesn't make it right for everyone. And so I like to view it more as like a comparison, because granted, like probably 99% of our DNA is the same, but it's that 1% that makes us unique based on what our soul wants to experience. That's where everything appears to be different between us. But it's just that little tiny bit that creates that uniqueness that allows us to be able to see the different experiences and different perspectives, and hopefully get to that point to where we can take ownership of what we're creating and not just reacting to these things. It's
Yes.
so important to understand this.
Right, and to lead yourself. So, that's the beautiful thing where you can take ownership, like you say, and lead yourself in a way that feels good to you. And there aren't any rules for that. There's no conditioning for that. That's unique to you. So I think that'll be another beautiful piece that, we'll definitely be talking about.
Oh yeah, this could be eternal, which it kind of
Yeah.
will be in a way, because of what we're looking to do. So it's kind of nice for this first one just to kind of be like an introduction, like what we're here for, what Kristin does, what I do, and that may be something like, do you want to describe like what you do, Kristin, when you work with your clients, and that way you can get a bigger perspective of like where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely.
On
I
the spot.
I do a lot. It's hard to narrow it down, but
Yeah.
I've been doing coaching for a while now, and I have led retreats. Fred and I led a retreat in Sedona, Arizona. That was just
Oh
beautiful.
my God.
So I
Amazing.
do retreats in Naples, Florida, and Marco Island as well. I could do VIP days here, but my real focus is root cause healing. And so I like to look at whatever symptoms or distress or dis-ease, I break up the word, that people are presenting with, and look at the real goal being, what is the root cause? No band-aid approaches. And that can be from a physical perspective, a mental, emotional, or spiritual level. And so really to transform on the spot and work with individuals that are just ready to live the way we've been talking about this whole podcast episode. So it's just beautiful to serve in that way.
It is, and it's very similar to the same thing that I do. Then there was one little difference that I do a hand reading with people.
Yes.
The first time I meet, and it's a pretty amazing experience just to go through a chirology hand reading. So that's always allowed me to see traumas in childhoods and see what unconscious programs are that people are running based on those first 4 or 5 years of their life. And then like jumping into that deeper theta brainwave to understand what that program is, and watching that shift and change in a quantum sense, and what we really are doing in the theta brainwave is converting wavelength to particle. So whenever I'm witnessing a healing, like I'm not the healer, I just watch and witness them and their soul do all this shifting. It becomes incredibly powerful and empowering for that individual because they learn that they have the capacity to do this themselves. So I love that co-creative capacity of what we both do in healings versus a codependency. We don't want to create more codependencies with people. We
Completely.
want to empower
Yes, power everyone. And what Fred does with the chirology is just so beautiful. I do work with like the natal chart and gene keys and human design, but he has, I call that the blueprint, of your existence, and Fred's got, like, you can literally see on your hands what you've been wired to do in this lifetime, and it's just beautiful physical evidence. I know for myself, it made me feel so good to see what these lines or swirls or loops that you discovered, because I was like, wow, that makes sense now that I was wired that way.
that. Yeah, it allows people to understand why.
Yes.
Because if we don't know why something's happening, naturally our brain's going to go into a fight or flight
Mhm.
because it's uncertain of what's going on. So it feels it needs to be protective in a way. So why is the answer to everything. And it's funny because kids are always literally telling us what our reason is here, because how many times do kids say why? So in their own mind, they're almost already like telling you, like, this is the bigger picture of what we're here for, is to figure out why these things are happening, shift and bring in that balance so it becomes neutral. We want it to be wavelength energy, therefore it's not going to create things imbalanced in our life. And when you're in that balanced state, then eventually we can get to the point where we can consciously choose what particle we want to experience. And if we have that true choice of choosing fear or love, why would we ever choose fear to create? And the bigger challenge
That's the
is,
question.
that's the big question. But the challenge, which is kind of a beautiful experience, is So it's showing us what unconsciously our brain believes the truth is usually a fearful experience versus a loving experience, because most of the times we're creating more challenges than beautiful things in our life. It's going to be different for each person, of course, but ultimately we want to get into that point to where we get to choose, pick and choose what we want to create. But if our brain only knows one thing, then it either chooses it or it does nothing, and that's where we see a lot of people that will distract themselves. Like, I just don't want to go forward anymore because everything I do just feels bad. Then they just, they want to kind of find a way just to distract themselves.
Check out. Yeah.
But totally. But ultimately, our fear is our biggest lesson. View your fears as your 3-year-old self that's in pain, that doesn't understand why things are happening. Because if you view fear through a loving lens, it really brings balance to that experience, and it doesn't become that crippling, fearful, reactive fight or flight stage.
Because you can't bypass it. Exactly. You have to bring it to the table and see it as a house guest is the way I view it. So
absolutely. Wow. So this has been a good first introduction for this. What we can do, which I would love to do, and I think we're definitely going to be doing on every one of these, is just to Chris and I are just going to be a witness, for the healing for you, whoever's watching this, in whichever context that it relates to you. It may not be specific in the details, but we can at least witness the unconscious mind understanding all of these different ways that we've described and different things that we've talked about, just so your unconscious mind can have that information available. It's like, I create this existence, and that's okay. Make sure that that you feel safe to be able to understand that change is where things are going to happen, because change can be scary. But if we also know that change is beautiful and change feels good, then our body will be able to create change through a more beautiful experience versus a painful one.
beautiful. I love that you share that. Yes. And so, any questions you have, feel free to reach out to Fred or myself, and we can build upon this after the episodes and help you kind of understand it more. But yeah, just know that you started the process just by listening to this podcast of healing and self-empowerment.
Absolutely. If you have any questions or topics you would like us to discuss, throw it in the comment section or reach out to us. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that we're going to just focus on a comment. Like, we'll put that in the pool of information that can come through. But then whenever we connect next time, who knows? Maybe we'll just have a hat. There's like 5 different topics, and we'll just randomly pick one out of a hat and let that beautiful energy of creation just guide us as to what would be best to discuss that day. But who knows? Something may come up that morning for both Kristin and I that we're like, all right, we got to talk about this today. But I would love to see comments and reflections of people to see what and where you're having challenges with, and what it is that you're can't quite fully understand.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love that idea.
And then hopefully we can help with that process.
Yes.
To the limits of our own experiences, because you've got to meet everyone where they're at, and where you're at is going to change every second of the day. So we want to be also okay with change, with change being good for us, because we really are just balancing this energy out, getting into that still point state and choosing to create something different than what we have created before.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So you want to just go quiet for a little bit. We'll get into this deeper theta brain, and you may even start to feel a little bit of a heavier energy coming your way. And both Chris and I were just witness for whoever's watching this to bring in all this beautiful information, this understanding, these beautiful feelings of feeling safe, knowing that this is going to be a beautiful way to start to consciously create your existence, and to know and take ownership that you are not a victim in any way, shape, or form. And what is being created is there for a purpose and a reason. And it's okay. And it's perfectly safe for that. Is that good?
Do it.
All right. So it'll just be a couple minutes. Ooh, just know that you're safe. Everything will happen in the highest and the best of grace and ease. We're going to bring in some beautiful, unconditional, loving energy of that creative force, just to give us that tool to work with in order to allow these shifts and changes to happen on a deeper unconscious level, as well as in that beautiful heart space to experience these safe emotions. Safety is so important, to understand that you are safe to experience everything and anything in this existence. Okay, thank you. It's funny. You opened your eyes like on my timer of like 1 minute, 1 hour, 11 minutes and 11 seconds. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. So I'm just, if you're wondering why the time is off, that's what it was. And I was just like, happened to see the time. And then I saw you open your eyes. I'm like, get the hell out.
That's a powerful sign. Beautiful. Well, thank you, everyone. I felt a lot of healing take place during that silence. So that'll just continue. And again, like Fred already said, it doesn't matter when you view this, the timing it's contained in this and it's all divine. So you'll come upon it when you're ready to release or heal. And I hope you've enjoyed it. We've definitely loved sharing.
Thank you so much. And it's a beautiful thing because I did kind of just like feel that ripple effect, almost like when you throw a rock in a pond and it just ripples out. And the beautiful thing is like this safety that we're like really trying to promote and bring in through the still point of healing. And just this one little podcast about just feeling safe to be you and you feeling safe to make different choices and feeling safe to understand deeper truths is that's kind of becomes almost like a neon light, like open for business. So people that are looking and trying to feel safe about things, this may be one of the reasons why you watched or found this video, but you really didn't know till the end of it as to what it was fully involved with. So just the watching of this is enough for it to shift and take change. I've seen it so many times. It blows a mind because it's something that we haven't been told can be possible.
Completely.
Oh my God, yeah. So there's going to be more of this coming for sure. So I just want to thank you, Kristin, for being the spearhead for this and bringing this all together for sure. And it's exciting to see where this is going to flow and go.
Yes, I can't wait till the next one.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.